Somebody asked me a long time ago to make a Dominic Fike tutorial, and I put it off for a while because I don't really listen to it too much, but now we're here. We're going to do it. I want to say it's pretty easy. It relies heavily on playing in a minor key with like slight breakup tones, but that's really it. So let me play the beat, and then I'll go through how I actually made it. First thing I did was start with this little bass line. It's actually not a bass, it's a guitar. I threw it through the 𝗕𝗘𝗠𝗘𝗥 and I transposed it down 12. And then after that, I disabled the cab, pretty much disabled the whole amp. And then I just threw it through an actual bass amp emulation, the MPEG SVT3 Pro. So yeah, that sounds like this. Kind of sounds like a bass. I needed a little more gain, so I gained the utility. After that, I wanted to be a little more fat, a little more warm, so I put our bass on. And then because I did that, it was pretty boomy. I had to do some EQ, so I just threw Pro Q on, just a little cut around 280. After that, I needed some distortion, some saturation, so I threw Decapitator on. These are the Decapitator settings. They're pretty basic. I don't even think I really touched too much. A little more brightness and some drive. Next, some more EQ. Next was the audio effect rack. Basically what it is two EQs, one filtering the low, one filtering the high. And in the high channel, it goes through a chorus, and then it goes through a saturator. And that sounds like this. And without it, so yeah, pretty cool. I do it a lot for bass. You don't want to throw a chorus just on the bass. You can, but low end will kind of get messed up if you throw a low end through a chorus. And the chorus is just the June 6 chorus from Arturia, and the saturator is the T-Rack saturator. Great saturator. Lastly, I needed some control, so I just threw a compressor on. Not really doing too much. And that's being sent to a reverb, just slightly. You can send basses to reverbs, I promise you. Next thing was to create a drum loop. Well, actually, I didn't create the drum loop. I found a drum loop here. Kind of like loose and vintage feeling. It just has a bit of an auto pan on and some analog machines on it. That makes it sound like old. Without, and then with it, and with the auto pan. Just like slowly moving left to right. It's a cool beat, but it's not really exactly what I want, so I had to layer it with some drums. So I decided to go into Superior Drummer, and I forget what I chose. It looks like I just chose the default singer-songwriter EZX. That sounds like this. So that's the dry signal. It's going to a spring reverb, and it's also going to a little delay, but I needed it to sound vintage, so again, we threw a Verve analog machines on there. And then I needed some. This is interesting. I don't even know why Basslane is on here, but it works. Basslane is kind of like what I use on bass to widen bass out instead of doing like that chorus technique I talked about earlier. But I guess I wanted it on drums. Interesting choice. Interesting choice. I don't know if I would do that again, but it worked for this, so maybe I would. Next, we put it into Sound City Studios. This is basically just to do some really realistic sounding room reverb, because I wanted it to sound like it's being played in a room, like it's a real drum set. There's quite a bit of low end, so we put an EQ on, and I'd actually cut some low end out right here. And that's it. So that being layered with the drum loop sounds like this. And yeah, I mean, for the chorus, it changes up. It goes to a ride. But that's it. It's a very simple drum beat. It loops for the entire song. And yeah, next, guitar. Super simple little patch, just THU. Okay, it doesn't look simple, but it is, I promise you. Just a bit of drive. We're going through a deluxe reverb IR, and just some tremolo and some reverb, and that's it. That's the whole patch. I would give you the patch, but you have to also have these IRs. These IRs, I think, were like $50. So I recommend them. They sound really good. The second guitar that's more pan to the middle. You'll notice I didn't pan this left and right. I just kind of wanted the guitar to sit over here. This guitar is the same sort of thing, I believe. Yeah. Pretty much the same thing. And they're also going to a sub. So without the effects on the sub, it sounds like this. So I wanted some distortion, some saturation. Just a tiny bit. And then I needed this to sound like it was going through like a tape machine to make it like a little more lo-fi, a little more vintage sounding. So Tascam Porta 1. And you'll notice it jumps out a lot, so it needs some more control. So I'll throw a compressor on. Just a bit more control. Dominic Fike stuff is pretty dynamic. You don't want to make it sound like it's just kind of the same dynamic level throughout the entire song. But you don't want it to be super jumpy, because that sounds pretty shitty too. So just, light compression. Lastly, some EQ. This was pretty important because I remember hating this. Just very sharp. So, a bit of a dynamic EQ, just cutting out when that stuff gets a little too loud. And it's also going to all the effects sends. It's going to a room reverb, it's going to the spring reverb, it's going to the actual reverb, and it's going to a slap. And all together so far, it sounds like this. So for the most part, it stays kind of the same, especially in this section right here. It's just the bass, the guitar, and the drums. And then here is where it actually gets a little more different for the last kind of set of the song. So we have this guitar. It's going through the 𝗕𝗘𝗠𝗕𝗥 Imperial. I'll open it up just to see exactly what I did. It looks like just a bit of compression, and these are the settings. Very simple. If you'll notice, it sounds like it's being played in a room. That's because it's going to this room reverb, and on the room reverb, we have Valhalla Room. It's also going to a sub, so on that sub, we have some EQ. Just cleaning up a little bit. Especially this area here was a little overbearing. And it's going to a Studer, just for some saturation. I use the Studer a lot. I love the way it distorts. The Studer's got some great saturation. I mean, it sounds really good. I set it to 7.5 IPS because I wanted the high end to be a little more rolled off. Otherwise, it's kind of just a little brighter. And that's it for that guitar. Lastly, we have a shaker, which is just a Cashmere shaker. I mean, literally nothing else. There's no processing or anything. And the final last thing is the piano. Piano is Alicia's Keys, I believe. Let's see, it usually is. Yeah, Alicia's Keys. Seems like it is just the bass default patch. It sounds like this. It's obviously going through the room reverb, it's going through the spring reverb, and it's going through the actual reverb, which is a Valhalla vintage reverb. And it's going through a delay. So basically my theory behind all these sends is like the room reverb is obviously to make it sound like it's being played in the room. Like that sounds like it's just being played over here behind you. The spring reverb is more for like the percussive elements. You know? The regular reverb is kind of like general. Just like a smoother, longer tailed reverb. And the delay is, anything that needs delay. Right? The slap, just for anything that kind of needs a little more width. And like a slapback delay is kind of like a very vintage sounding thing. Like in an Elvis song, you hear a ton of slapback delay, which I don't like, but it's vintage. So it's good on vocals. It's good on vocals, yeah. So if I was to play the entire thing without the sends, it'd sound like this. Sounds good. Then you add the sends in. Sounds, a little more realistic, a little more natural. Oh, and lastly, I do have a guitar solo. I put it through the 𝗕𝗘𝗠𝗕𝗥. It has a little more modulation. It's going through the chorus, it's going through delay, it's going through a reverb. So I will disable all these plugins. Kind of a cool solo. Then I wanted it to kind of like be a little more phasey, so I threw a phaser on. And just, you know, a bit of EQ. So, with everything and the solo, sounds like this. And that's the beat. I'm gonna upload it to the channel, to the second channel, the third channel, I guess. If anybody wants to use it. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I'm gonna do something different today, and I'm going to take all the effects off of these stems, and I'm gonna export the stems, and you will be able to download the stems and mix it yourself, if you'd like. So yeah, have fun.